Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of PTCGRadio. So today, we need to talk about Eternatus. And I know that we've talked about Eternatus a couple of times. And I know that we've all agreed at this stage that Eternatus is a frankly ridiculous Pokemon. But you see, we've gone and found out a ruling, and by we, I mean Stefan Ivanov, the lovely chap who kind of can't stop winning North American internationals. And the thing is that this ruling has actually gone and made this an even more ridiculous deck than it was before. It's also made me potentially rethink my Pikachu VMAX will be just as good as it, but that's a conversation I think we can probably have at the end of the video. Now, as a quick reminder, the reason we like Eternatus VMAX is twofold. Firstly, it lets you have 8 bench Pokemon as long as you only play Darkness Pokemon. And secondly, for 2 energy, you do 30 damage for each of your Darkness Pokemon in play. So for 2 energy, which you should be able to manually attach quite honestly, you should be doing 270 damage. And don't think that the extra bench space is just there so that you can do extra damage with Eternatus. It also opens up a whole bunch of new tech options, things like Galarian Zigzagoon, where you go, I want to bench it and get the extra 10 damage, but you know what? I don't know if I can spare the bench space. Well, that's no longer an issue. Well, I mean, I suppose it will be eventually, but it's much less of an issue than it would be in other decks. Now, we do need to mention the ruling before we go any further, and the ruling is all to do with the Eternal Zone ability. You see, Eternal Zone says if all of your Pokemon in play are Darkness type, you can have up to 8 Pokemon on your bench, and you can't put non-Darkness Pokemon into play. If this ability stops working, discard Pokemon from your bench until you have 5. And the ruling essentially is to do with Devolution Spray, or Devolution Spray Z. Regular Devolution Spray did rotate out a little while ago. And Devolution Spray Z, which will survive the rotation, which we will have for the next year, came out in Unbroken Bonds, says you may devolve one of your evolved Pokemon by shuffling any number of evolution cards on it into your deck. So let's say you've got an Eternatus VMAX with 22 or more damage counters on. Now, the 22 or more is relevant because Eternatus V has 22 damage counters worth of health, 220 health. So if you've got 22 or more damage counters on, then Eternatus V should be KO'd as soon as you Devolution Spray Z. And in most situations, it would be. You devolve down to Eternatus, and then the game goes, well, hang on a second. You got a 220 HP Pokemon with more than 220 damage, or the same as, it gets KO'd. But what actually happens, and I believe Stefan when he says this, he says it works on TCGO, the online client, but it's also the actual ruling. What essentially happens is, you devolve Eternatus, the ability stops working. So you need to discard Pokemon until you've only got 5 bench Pokemon. You need to essentially resolve the ability not working. And then Eternatus gets KO'd. Essentially, you cannot KO Eternatus before resolving the thing with its ability, whereby you get down to 5 bench Pokemon. So discard Eternatus. And this works. Now, it is very, very important to note, this won't work if Eternatus VMAX is active. And the reason it won't work if Eternatus VMAX is active is because you're only discarding bench Pokemon, so you discard your bench Pokemon down to 5, and then Eternatus gets KO'd. Similarly, if you've got more than one Eternatus VMAX in play, this won't work. Because you'll Devolution Spray one Eternatus VMAX, but the other will keep the ability rolling, so then the one you just evolved will get KO'd. So just don't evolve your other Eternatus Vs. If you keep all the rest of your Eternatus as Eternatus V, the ability's not there. You Devolution Spray Z your Eternatus VMAX, it should be KO'd but it isn't. You go down to 5 bench Pokemon, and then you just evolve one of your bench Eternatus V, you get the ability back, you bench 3 more Pokemon and you're back hitting for 270. Bearing in mind you won't always need to hit 270. If you only need to hit 180, you don't even need the extra bench spaces. But you can still take advantage of this. Again, this will only work if you've got one Eternatus VMAX, if that Eternatus VMAX is on the bench, and you've got 6 or more bench Pokemon. Because you need to make sure it's your only Eternatus, and that it gets discarded while you go down to 5 bench Pokemon. But if you do, it works. And now this basically breaks the whole thing wide open. Because not only have you got a Pokemon that for 2 energy does 270 damage, not only have you got a 340 HP Pokemon, but you've now got essentially an item card that can heal up entirely. You can have 330 damage on this, and you can play an item card that will heal it. Now, it's not perfect. You will lose the energy, and you will lose the Eternatus V. Really, really nicely here, you will actually keep the Eternatus VMAX. The Eternatus VMAX gets shuffled into your deck, which is really, really useful because in order for this to work, you need to make sure that you have an Eternatus V on the bench, or in the active, and that you are able to evolve it, which means you need the VMAX to evolve it, but this will be going into your deck ready to be searched out and evolve it up, and jobs are good 'un. Yeah, this ruling makes Eternatus a lot, and I do mean a lot better. There is now a way you can play Eternatus, and I do expect to see a lot of people trying this, where you basically play the game, making sure you never bench more than one Eternatus VMAX unless you have to. And then you play 4 Devolution Spray Z, and anytime you're about to be KO'd, you go back to the bench, Devolution Spray Z, evolve up, get some more bench Pokemon, and you're off and rolling. Maybe you have to play a couple more copies of Ordinary Rod to make sure that you can recover those Pokemon to come back. But remember, when you're discarding your bench Pokemon, when this ability stops working, you can be discarding your Galarian Zigzagoon. And then you Ordinary Rod them back in and play them again and drop extra damage. Any coming into play abilities here, this isn't quite as easy as just picking them up with something like a Scoop Up Net. But you can get them in the discard, Ordinary Rod them back in and reuse them. And if they're stuck on your bench, you cannot reuse them unless you've got your Scoop Up Net and you draw into it. And that's not the only thing. I mean, we haven't really had a chance to talk about it in any of our videos up to now, so let's mention it now quickly. Belelba and Brycen-Man. You see, Belelba and Brycen-Man went and got banned. I did a video about it, link in the description. And a lot of people have said that Belelba and Brycen-Man got banned because it was too good of an Eternatus counter. But if we do go back to the official announcement from Pokemon, it literally says, Control decks and Mill decks, strategies that try to discard all the cards in the opponent's deck, have a place in the Pokemon TCG, but when they become too powerful, the play environment becomes less enjoyable. Belelba and Brycen-Man has been identified as a card that makes these decks highly effective in tournament play. In an effort to reduce the strength of control decks and Mill decks, Belelba and Brycen-Man has been banned. So I know a lot of people are saying that Belelba and Brycen-Man got banned because it was too good of an Eternatus counter, but remember the official announcement specifically said we're banning it because it's too good of a mill card. But the fact remains that Belelba and Brycen-Man still did, if you discarded 3 other cards from your hand, forced both players to get down to a free card bench or a free Pokemon bench, which would be really, really harsh against Eternatus. They'd still have their ability, and they would be able to choose which Pokemon got discarded, but they still need to recover those 5 bench Pokemon, which is kind of harsh. Although they would be able to discard any super damaged Pokemon if they wanted to. So, frankly, the play environment for Eternatus is just getting better and better. I've told you it's not the top deck around at the moment, and I honestly don't think it is at the moment, or at least I don't think we have any concrete data to say so, because the best we've had in terms of tournaments we can use to judge was our unofficial nationals in Japan, where it was the most represented deck in top 16. There were 3 of them, but it didn't actually make it even into the final, which was 2 Vikavolt decks. Hence why I'm putting Vikavolt number 1 for the time being. Will Eternatus overtake Vikavolt as the number 1 deck? I think there is an excellent excellent chance that does happen in the not too distant future, especially when we've got rulings like this, which are just coming along and making this card way better than it was before, bearing in mind how good it is. I mean, I haven't even mentioned the fact that Eternatus V for a single energy does 30 damage and attaches a darkness from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon. So essentially you go second and you should end the turn with 2 Eternatus V, each of which have an energy on, and you can VMAX and add an energy to either of them and start attacking. I haven't mentioned that darkness type Hooper that does 90 damage for a single energy if it became active this turn, which is a crazy good single prize, single energy attacker, basic as well, that you can use to back you up if you don't want to use a free prize attacker. I haven't mentioned the ridiculous synergy with Crobat V. Lets you draw until you've got 6 cards in your hand. Bearing in mind you can only play Darkness Pokemon. No, ladies and gentlemen, we've talked about this deck before, but with Balelba and Brycen-Man being rotated, and this ruling allowing you to completely abuse Devolution Spray Z, I mean, it basically becomes the equivalent of Max Potion. You get to heal all the damage, but there's a fairly significant downside. I don't mean it's the same card, I mean heal all the damage, but you've got to reconfigure yourself a little bit afterwards. Except other decks can't use it. It is a ridiculous little thing, and I'll be honest with you, I did not know this. I was completely unaware of this ruling until Stefan tweeted it out, hence why we're talking about it today. But it really does make me think a little bit differently about Eternatus. So what does that do to Pikachu VMAX then? Pikachu VMAX, the reason I think they're quite similar is because Pikachu for free energy lets you do 270 damage, though you do need to discard all the energy attached to it. So essentially you've got a fighting weak free prize Pokemon that hits 270 damage every turn. Now it's got 30 less HP and it doesn't get the extra bench space for techs, but it's getting free energy on rather than getting 2 energy and 8 bench Pokemon. Bearing in mind you got stuff like Tapu Koko Prism Star, and that new Electrode lets you KO it to accelerate 2 energy from your deck to any of your Pokemon. So I don't think it's that difficult to get the energy on Pikachu. But the fact that Pikachu doesn't have this silly Devolution Spray Z trick, and it's got the 30 less HP, and it doesn't have the extra bench space for the tricks, maybe that does mean I need to start thinking that Pikachu, although a very good card, and I stand by that, might not end up being quite as good as Eternatus after all. It's going to be fun finding out, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to be fun finding out. But for now, I want to know what you think about Eternatus and whether you do think it is that gosh darn good. So let me know in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at The Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.